Greeting everyone, I'm Kevin, and today I'm going to tell you 10 books I will never read. The 10 books I'm going to talk to you about are in alphabetical order, so not between will most likely not read and will definitely not read, so they're in alphabetical order, so no ranking whatsoever. The first is technically not a book, it's an author, and that is Brandon Sanderson. I am never going to read Brandon Sanderson for two reasons. The first one is that he writes mainly fantasy. The second is his books. Have you seen his books? They are bricks. They're like this thick and high fantasy, and high fantasy isn't something that I normally read. The only high fantasy book that I have read that is adult is the Lord of the Rings series, which is kind of because of my love for the movies. So high fantasy isn't something that I usually read. So I am most likely not going to read anything Brandon Sanderson because of the genre high fantasy, as well as the books are long. The second one is the Divergent series. Now this doesn't have anything to do with the books themselves or the content in the books. I love that kind of like dystopian setting. I love that. But the reason I'm never going to read the Divergent series is because a few years ago, me and my sister went to rent movies, and we rented The Fault in Our Stars because it just came out, and Divergent because it just came out. We made a bad decision to first watch The Fault in Our Stars and then watched Divergent. And if you don't know this, the two main characters in The Fault in Our Stars, the ones that are kind of having a romance, are siblings in Divergent. The guy, there's a sex scene in The Fault in Our Stars, and we see them kissing and everything, and then the next movie we watched directly after The Fault in Our Stars, they're playing siblings. Me and my sister, we were so uncomfortable, and we watched the whole thing and we were like, oh my god, this was such a bad idea. So in my head, it's those two characters, and so in my head it's the same characters as in The Fault in Our Stars, so it's kind of like I know that I won't be able to read Divergent because I will have those characters in my head, those actors portraying them in both The Fault in Our Stars, the couple, and the siblings in Divergent. So I know that I won't be able to kind of separate the actors from the book. Because of that, which is unfortunate, I will not read the Divergent series. Number 3 shouldn't be a surprise to anyone watching because it's the 50 Shades of Grey series. If you're not aware, 50 Shades of Grey is popular both because it's a traditionally published erotica, because it's a Twilight fanfiction. Two things that a lot of people talk about when they talk about the 50 Shades of Grey series. And if you heard the first part that I mentioned, that it's an erotica, a series that is just erotica, I am never going to read that. So when I read adult romance books, I skip sex scenes. So just imagine how many pages I will skip when I read an erotica. I won't get anything out of it. So no, I'm not going to read 50 Shades of Grey. Number 4 on this list is Little Women, and there's again two reasons why I will not read this book. One, have you seen how thick it is? Second, it's historical. I think this is a classic. If I remember correctly, it's from Jane Austen's time. So no, it's not for me. That's just not something I'm interested in reading. Coming up on number 5, we have the Lunar Chronicles. So the reason why I have this on this list is because of the kind of backlash that it's gotten, because it's based on, I think it's based on Chinese history and mythology and stuff, or it's set in East Asia or something that is East Asian inspired, if I remember correctly. And the author is not from that culture, from that geographical place. And I've heard a lot of things that it's kind of racist against the cultures and the people living in the places that the Lunar Chronicles is inspired by or set in. I don't know if it's set there or just inspired by East Asian countries. So I just feel like, no, I'm not going to read that. I would much rather read books by East Asian authors with places inspired by East Asian countries. Like, that makes so much more sense to me. And this kind of brings us to number 6, which is Magnus Chase. I do love Rick Riordan's writing. I absolutely adore the Percy Jackson series. And the reason I'm never going to read Magnus Chase is because kind of what I said earlier for the Lunar Chronicles. So I used to have this kind of ongoing conversation with myself about the books I read. I noticed that with the whole mythology thing, I would much rather read books that have that mythological aspect to them by people from those cultures who grew up learning about the mythology and stuff. And then I thought, why would I not do that with my own culture? And I'm Nordic. Norse mythology is something that I grew up learning about. Norse mythology, their religion, which doesn't have a name in English, because of course it doesn't. And that religion is something that is very much present in today's Sweden, even though we don't believe in those gods the same way. There are still people, that religion is still an official religion here, and it has a following. And because it has that impact on society, and because it's part of my cultural heritage, I feel like I don't want to read about my culture. Like, I don't want to read about my cultural heritage with the gods and the things, the beings and the creatures from that religion and our mythology, our folklore, from the perspective of an American who I don't think he's ever lived through a Swedish winter. I might be wrong. Has he ever been in a Nordic country? I don't know. And after the whole thing with Marvel and how they handled, that is a whole other story. No, I will not do that. Coming up at number 7 is Saga. And this is, again, unfortunate, because the premise of this graphic novel series is amazing. It sounds just up my alley. The thing is, I've heard from a lot of different places, a lot of different people, that this series includes graphic depictions of sexual acts. That sounds so like a teacher. Like, the way that whole sentence sounds like something a teacher would say, so I feel like a stereotypical teacher right now. But that's the thing, like, I'm asexual. I skip sex scenes when I read books with, like, just, you know, traditional books, because I just see, okay, nope, I will just skip that. But it's so much harder to skip sex scenes when it's like in a graphic novel, because I will, no matter how much I try not to, I will see it, and I will never unsee it. And it's just like, it's not for me, and I am okay with that. I'm a little sad that it's not for me, of course, but there's nothing I can do about it. And I've heard from a lot of different people that these sex scenes take up a lot of space and are very, very graphic. So unfortunately, Saga made it to this list. Coming up at number 8, we have the Shadowhunter universe. You can actually scratch that and say Cassandra Clare. I am never going to read from Cassandra Clare, and there are just a lot of reasons why I'll never read Shadowhunter universe. There are just so many problematic things surrounding Cassandra Clare, surrounding the Shadowhunter universe. That is not for me. I don't want that kind of problematic energy on my bookshelves. I don't want it. And so because of that, I feel like I'm never going to read Cassandra Clare. I will not enjoy her books. I will not enjoy the Shadowhunter universe. And let's face it, I will never get through the first book because of the whole incest thing. Like, who thought that was a good idea? So yeah, Shadowhunter universe, Cassandra Clare on this list. Coming up at number 9, we have Throne of Glass. And I DNF'd the first book, which is called Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass is a series. It's Sarah J. Maas's first series, which is a high fantasy, and it has like the main character is an assassin. And I read like I read a chunk of it. I think I read 50 to 80 pages, somewhere along those lines. So I didn't stop after 5 pages. I tried. But there was just a lot of things that annoyed me and frustrated me about the book. And so I went to Goodreads, I read reviews of the book, and there were a lot of people amplifying my thoughts. Just made it seem from the reviews that I read that these things will continue. They will continue throughout the book and throughout the series. And I just felt like I gave it a go and I'm never going to pick it up again, and that is fine by me. Then we have the last book on this list, so coming up at number 10 is the Twilight series. There are a lot of reasons why I will never read Twilight. The main reason that I will never read Twilight is because it has vampires. I don't like vampires. I don't like vampires in stories. I think it's overdone. I think it's cliche. That it's just like vampire romance. It's not for me, and that is fine. And if you love Twilight, good. I'm happy you do, because honestly it makes me sad when I find a book series and I'm like, I don't want to read that. Because I feel like I want to read every book there is, but I also know that that is not possible because every book isn't for me, so that is fine. So that was it for this video. I hope you enjoy, and if you did, please leave a like and let me know what popular books you'll never read. See you next time. Bye!